House Study Committee on the school system reporting requirements. This is the second meeting. We welcome you here. There is a sign-up sheet that is being distributed. We didn't do a real good job last meeting of getting everybody to sign it, and consequently we don't have a record of who was here, so we would appreciate it if you would sign that. We have a full agenda for this morning, a number of things, a number of presentations. We want to get started so we'll have a chance to get through as much of that as possible. We would like for those who are presenting, encouraging the members of the committee to ask questions and make it as interactive as we can so that we can achieve our purpose of looking at the reporting requirements for school systems and seeing if there are things that can be done to ease the burden on local school systems without lessening the amount of information that is needed in reporting. So we will begin our agenda with Betsy Howerton from the Legislative Council. And I think if you should have a copy, members should have a copy of her report. It has at the top of the statutory reporting requirements on local school systems.
You got some extras there?
I have some.
I got that.
Following Ms. Howerton's presentation, we'll have from Hartman Hartley's law firm, Corey Kirby, who also has a chart, and we have copies of it. So, anyone who's to do.
Okay, what this report is, basically I went through mostly Title 20, where of course the education requirements are, and tried to pull out any statute that required a local Board of Education to file a report or a plan or something like that. And I also went down to the school level, so if it required a report, say of a principal, a teacher, something like that. So I kind of took a broad net with the idea that we could pull things out kind of as we go. But in addition, I also included things that were reports not just to the State Board of Education, but would be possibly to a school council, to PSC, to juvenile courts, that kind of thing. What's not in here, though, are going to be things that are required of local boards or local personnel that was that's required only by state board rules. So, for instance, the gender equity that we talked about last week, at the last meeting, is not in here because in the statute, the requirements on the state board, which of course is going to have to get the information from the local board, but the requirement itself is not in the statute. So I was going to, do you want to go through each of these, or just kind of hit some highlights, or?
If you can highlight the ones that you, from your study of it, that you think there's some potential for us to look at.
Okay.
At some possible changes.
Okay. I first need to point out, I found in looking at this yesterday, I hadn't looked at it in a while, there's actually an error. I've transposed the numbers, and the second, third, and fourth entries there, it says 20-2-76. That should be actually 20-2-67. Off each of those three. All right. As far as ones that, I guess a lot of these, I am not going to be really in a position to know whether or not it's something that is used. I mean, for instance, just the first one, the school breakfast program compliance plan. It's according to the statute, it's a one-time plan that has to be filed. Those next three are all budgetary type things that only apply if there is a budget irregularities that the Department of Audits finds. So those three right there are not ones that every school system has to do, only once when that happens. 20-2-86, that's budget expenditure information. And that is, that again is not an annual report, it's upon request for state board rule.
The class size rules or laws that were passed this past year, did that impact the reporting requirements on class size? Yeah. You all remember?
Mr. Chairman, we're already doing, we're already doing class size for all that.
Right. But did we make any change in the way we have to do that? Okay.
Let's see, top of page 2, that 20-2-153 is counting EIP students, and that's done in conjunction with the FTE count. So some of these are kind of interrelated. And obviously, we need FTE counts for the funding aspect of it. 20-2-154, achievement scores for the REP program. Again, some of these I don't know, exactly what's done with the data when it's reported. That's an annual report. So
If y'all have questions, raise them while we're going through this. Y'all don't mind.
20-2-157, that's the HOPE. It's the reporting for the upcoming seniors as far as whether or not they're going to be eligible for the HOPE scholarship. So obviously that would be necessary. 20-2-160 and 2068.1 is the FTE counts. That second code section is the one that applies to charter schools, and that's of course twice a year. 167, 20-2-167, those next two are the budget and then the financial data required. I believe that's all done electronically now. Is that let's see, 20-2-168, that might be a possible one. It's an annual requirement where the local Board of Education has to submit their probable annual requirement of standard school equipment, and I think that the state board then works with DOAS to work on state contracts. I don't know if that's something that's in effect or something that could be phased out. Comments on that, but I'm not sure exactly if that's.
DOE staff, are you familiar with that report?
Not familiar, but we'll ask the question and try to get an answer.
Do you remember?
Chairman, I don't recall even being requested to submit them.
It might be something that's become obsolete, but it's still on the book. So maybe you could look at it. That last one on that page is the summer FTE counts for schools that are for year-round operations. At page 3, they get an annual report, a projected number of students eligible for the summer opportunity program for midterm adjustment purposes. 20-2-182 is the number of students in each class in each school class period. And it's reported in conjunction with the FTE count. I'm not sure exactly what's done with that either, if that's on the possibly.
What would be the purpose of that?
Class size report.
The number of students in each class in
We're already doing a class size report.
Notification or something? If we're doing a class sizes,
Where's that class?
Page 1, 2-86, site average class size by grade.
that was part of the question.
The full-time equivalent back there, that's your October, and then that's your first and second FTE counts. The other has to do with national class size. If you're over there, then you lose your money, or you got to adjust.
So that's one you really want us to take out.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, going on down 20-2-212.5. This is one that it only has to be submitted if the school is requesting an academic coach. So again, I've kind of put everything in here, so it's not something that will be required of every school system. 20-2-232, annual report, and then annually updated, a 3-year projected staff development plan to state board. I'm not not sure what's done with that either. Is that something that,
They didn't know consolidated grant application.
okay, does DOE do anything with that, or? Okay, I'm getting a yes by there. Okay. Let's see, 20-2-244, an annual report, although the state board can require it more often, about the effectiveness of the waiver if a local school system has, under that provision, they can waive certain provisions of Title 20. So if they're getting waivers right now, they have to do an annual report about the effectiveness of that. 20-2-250, pilot projects. Again, this is just if the school system has pilot projects. So it's if they do have that, however, they have to do an annual report, and that actually goes to the legislature, to the Appropriations and Education Committees in the House and Senate. I don't know. I've never seen those. Who actually looks at those? That might be something.
That's how they turn something into a continuation.
Yeah, maybe if there's
Into appropriation.
it might be a funding thing, maybe that, so I'm not sure.
But we need to check with those committees and find out if they're actually using
Okay.
information.
Projects last easy 2 or 3 years, and then the pilot's done away with it, and the state's got back funds and so sort of.
How many pilot projects are there in an average year?
We
don't have any right now.
Get started on it, and take the funding for it.
Yeah, we haven't had a pilot project in a while that we've officially called a pilot project under this code.
Last program would be the last.
That's a legislative pilot project, Mr. Young.
20 years ago.
Yeah, that was the last.
So what?
It moved up from K to 1.5 and stopped there for 12 or 15 systems. I guess it's still classified as a pilot program.
What was that?
Mayor Walton was a young man.
That's not advanced.
Which program was that?
That's the governor.
Elementary farm life.
Oh, yeah, that was the big one. I was involved with that one, yeah.
We're not doing it.
Yes.
The recipient of the report, is this a request for absence in education appropriation?
I assume it's
Yeah, the statute requires.
it's statutorily required.
To go to the committees.
So they requested.
We don't have any pilot projects.
No.
Okay, at the bottom of page 20-491, this is for school systems and schools that are saying lost funds. They have to do a periodic report, not less than annually, to make available to the public.
Pay for it out of SWAS funds.
Thank you.
I think that's when Miller's office, but, we'll keep that one.
Why don't we consider something that will be paid for by the state? The state's going to require it. Cost you $50,000 to get a performance audit though, just cost that school system classroom.
Well, considering how this lost audit of DeKalb turned out, I think that we'll save millions and millions of dollars to justify that audit.
Good, y'all can pay for ours.
Yes. We do a little fair share, for sure.
Better hurry on.
All right, page 4 at the top, 20-690.2, student attendance rates. The annual report goes both to the state board and the student attendance protocol committee.
Is that a new report?
I believe that's where we are reporting it as part of the student record. That's a very typical second indicator for AYP determinations. Is that what y'all are using for?
And it's being pulled up electronically.
Okay, the next one, names, ages, and residence of all students at the beginning of every school year, and that's reported at the local level to the local school system attendance officer. I guess that establishes the.
With electronic access to that data on the spot, and it changes so that I really, as a school superintendent, I don't see the need that our attendance officers have access to our student record database. When they need to know where a child is, they can get the latest information and struggle with key.
You actually, your schools are sending you a list of all their kids?
I think that's probably a requirement in the law that is passed with government computers. I mean, I can print a list at will, Mr. Chairman.
I don't
need you to
remember
send me
ever
one.
sending it as a principal
I
or
don't
receiving it as a superintendent.
It's been on the books since 1945.
I don't need you to go.
Alarm somewhere.
There's another one to come on.
That's part of that, do the information assessment.
Yes.
But have we been working on that since 1945?
It's in the paper.
Oh, I'm sorry, 85.
Then in the same code section, the third one down, daily attendance reports that don't have to be submitted, but just available for inspection to the attendance officer. So same thing, and obviously it's also been that long as well for those two. 20-2-701, names of truant children. That's an ongoing reporting requirement, upon the event to the juvenile court. And then let's see, the next one down that I've got marked as delayed. Okay, so that's all under that same code section, and I believe that ties into the. You know what they have to report to the DMVS, I think, for the, yeah, so that's where that comes in, and the kids get to be driving it. Yeah.
That's one that,
That is a
Maxwell's.
we need to talk about that one for a while. You've got the latest on the 20-2-701. It's my understanding that this program we've got for reporting, I don't know what all the acronyms for this is now, the DMV, that we have to turn in the truancies, the student misbehavior, criminal activities and all that to get children's driver's license suspended. I think we've got several problems, and some of you people might be able to help me out with that, but it's my understanding that if there's a hearing requested by a parent with the Department of Motor Vehicle, we have to have a administrator from the school system to attend that hearing. And you can have many of those hearings a month, possibly. The second problem is it's pretty much a revolving door from what I understand. If a child is suspended and the parent goes to the DMV and there's like a multitude of partnership issues, all the parents got to do is sign a letter and they get their driver's license back anyway. But the reporting requirements, the time that we're putting on our school systems to go through this charade is just not. I don't think we're not getting the product or the effort we're having put into it. And I don't know what we need to do to make it work, but it's not working from what I understand now. I've had several people come to me. I had people in my own church that had 2 kids that lose their license, and I made a phone call and I was told, hey, all they got to do, Dad's got to go to the DMV, sign a letter saying it's a hardship, and they'll get it back. So I don't know what we need to do to look at this, but we need to take some of this on their
Problem.
It is. And I think, and the DMV, is my understanding, if they don't put the name on the dismissal slip exactly the way it is on the driver's license, the DMV won't process it. Some of the school systems think the kids have lost their license and they wind up seeing the kids driving to school and say, what happened? Well, you spelled my name wrong, or you left out my middle initial, and they refused to suspend my license because they didn't have the quote exact name as on my driver's license. So we've got a problem with bureaucracy working there. And I don't know where we need to go to get it addressed, but we don't need to continue this type of level of requirements in our school systems.
Is that in this code section?
But I can get you with that. Anybody else have any?
Amen.
Sir?
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother.
They said that's not this code section, but they'll get us the code section that causes.
Well, I'm sorry, I brought that up too early. I can repeat that again when we get to it.
Well, it's actually in Title 40, I think, what you're talking about, the motor vehicle code, where they have the hearing.
Well, what are we doing with this one then?
This is where the information has to be made available to DMVS, so those code sections kind of work in conjunction with each other. But this is how they get the information as to whether or not a student is meeting attendance requirements. And then the
What are they
other,
gonna do with it if we're just reporting it to DMVS?
This report goes straight to the state board. This doesn't.
right,
Do they in turn report to DMV?
right.
Well, that's useless. Isn't it?
Well, part of the reason this is delayed is for the implementation of the student information system. So I guess theoretically, when that happens, it's not going to be actual physical reporting from state board to DMVS. It's just going to be, I would assume, kind of flow pretty.
I don't think that work. And why we got Social Security numbers out here? I thought we were trying to do away with Social Security numbers for Privacy Act. We can't use Social Security numbers anyway. We can't match the names. We'll be able to match Social Security numbers.
Well, you can't, we got the right to, or Hispanic, don't have processes anyway.
Oh, they don't have Social Security numbers.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yes, the social security number is known, so it is still in there.
Yeah, go on.
Going on to the next one, 20-2-737, this is a report that's filed upon the occurrence of a student disrupting a classroom. So it's a report at the local level, the teacher has to file to the principal. Again, kind of an effort to cast a broad net to get every reporting event. The next one is similar. The teacher has to, if the teacher removes a student from a classroom, they then have to file a report with the principal as well on that occurrence. 20-2-740 disciplinary and placement actions report. That's an annual report. The Department of Education. I'm not sure is that part of it. Didn't we talk last time about that kind of?
We talked
some of the stuff?
extensively about that one, I
Yeah.
believe. That's part of the student record. I will tell you that the I's and the T's that we have to dot and cross at the system level to send that report in or submit. It's not unusual to run that report and have, in Little Turner County, have 500 or 600 errors where the principal forgot to say it happened at school or on the bus or whatever. And we don't mind reporting anything that's going to be used to improve our system and our way of doing something. But if it's just a report that's coming in to go over across the street and sit on the shelf, we just said not do it.
Absolutely.
Now, that particular one, report, we're going to take up, I think, in the third meeting. We're going to concentrate later on this morning on the gender equity bill. We've asked one of the representatives who was key in getting that report passed to be here this morning to talk with us. And next meeting we'll try and have, I believe it was Senator Ford, who's one of the key individuals in getting that requirement, and we'll ask him to be here next week. So,
last one on that page is, again, a report upon an occurrence. If there's a alleged criminal conduct by a student, then the school administrator has to, or actually this is permissive, I didn't put that in, but this is a permissive report to the law enforcement agency based on the circumstances. Looking over page 5, 20-2-962, receipts and expenditures at the school level. This is something the principal has to report to the local board on a quarterly basis. And then 20-2-962, in conjunction with that, property inventory report, which is an annual report by the principal about what's going on at the school to the local board of education.
Mr. Chairman, did we decide at our last meeting that those two reports were not needed? I have a note here that maybe I decided that. Anybody use?
I don't remember the committee saying.
Well, I just got a note here that needed these reports. Anybody know about that? All right. Stand corrected.
I mean, I would have some question on 20-2-962. Correct me if I'm wrong, but most school systems now, with with the improved computer systems, are going to tracking the school funds in their system accounting.
Mr. Chairman, I can't speak for other districts, but I have my schools do a detailed balance sheet, including as part of my school board package. So that our school board members see every dollar who is supposed to do and what it's for monthly. So we still get those reports, of course, but we run them with the same computer system. We run that detailed balance sheet for a monthly system for information for our board.
I mean, if you're not tracking your school funds through the system accounting, you're getting an audit exception every year, so.
I thought that's what we were questioning about the problem, the audit exception we used to get from the school board. We're pretty much done with it now with the
Fixed asset.
fixed asset system.
Might be something that-
You know, I think it's still advisable for school districts, whether it's in legislation or just in practice, to keep track of things that are below those fixed asset values. VCRs, televisions, transfer numbers, breakers, and that kind of thing. Whether legislation's needed to do that.
Yeah, the local board could require that anyway without that legislation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you ask me, my gut feeling at this point would be to say the financial report probably could be done away with because it's taken care of with the audit reports. The property, I mean, I agree. Even though it was always a headache trying to figure out how you're going to format that and to what level. I mean, are they going to go out and count every little dodgeball in the gym?
Okay, the next two, 20-2-984.2, again, upon occurrence, this is alleged criminal conduct by a teacher, and so that report is made by the superintendent to the local board of education. And then also, if the local board determines that the matter warrants investigation, they then have to report it to the PSC. 20-2-1033, the local partnership plan is only if the school system applies for the grant, so again, it wouldn't apply to all school systems. 20-2-1184, similar thing, this is criminal activity by a student on school grounds, as opposed to the previous one we talked about, which would just generally be certain criminal activity, and this is again upon occurrence and reports to the principal and then to the superintendent or police, if it appears that it's valid information. And then on the last page, we've got 20-2067.1. This just applies to charter schools. There's a report required of each of those that basically documents the year's progress of the charter school. It has to go to either the local board or the state board, depending on who the issuer of the charter is, and also the DOE. 20-14-33, this is all student performance data and other student school completion and attendance data. I believe that's all part of the student information system, and that goes to DOE. And then the next one as well, student dropout information, is part of that. And then the last one, and I did do a comprehensive search in other titles, but I did put that one in there, the child abuse report, where school system has to report if there is an allegation of child abuse to DHR, they can do that.
Of course, when I'm talking about that particular issue a little bit more. Let me back up to one and show my ignorance here. And see if my fellow superintendent does it the same way. If you have criminal conduct by a teacher, which is required then, or suspicion of it, you're required to report that to PSC, whether or not you report it to the board, aren't you? I mean, say,
I will tell you, Mr. Chairman, I don't need a law to tell me that if I've got alleged criminal activity, I need to tell my board of education. If I want to keep my job, I'm going to do that.
right.
What
would you do if your board? What would you do if you reported to your board then, and they said, "Oh, yeah, that's the mayor's son. We don't want to report that to PSC."
Well, now, believe that statute requires the board to determine whether it's reported to PSC. The superintendent's reading of the.
That was my understanding, but that's not what this
Well, that's
says.
what the statute says.
Because I typically would make that report based on my understanding of the code of ethics and what's broken.
And this wouldn't then cover what's also in the PSC code of ethics. Their requirements probably are, more than what's here, but this is that particular
But I think it's
statute.
only for certain alleged, and I don't have the code section for you, probably know better than I do.
Yeah,
Only
it's-
for like.
it's certain.
Sub-agencies or.
Right,
or
right.
whatever,
And I'll be happy to talk about that a little further.
Okay. Yeah, clarify that in my mind, because it seems to me that we got two sets of rules, and they may be a little bit in conflict here, and if they are, we need to get rid of one of them.
I think they actually sort of dovetail relatively well from the standpoint that this code section not only places a burden on administrators, but also the local board of education to report one of the 7 deadly sins if it's alleged to have been committed by one of its educators. Whereas the PSC places, or the rules place more of a burden upon those folks who have a certificate who are aware of alleged activity or something like this. Because then the PSC says that if you have a certificate and you fail to make a required report, then you yourself could be held in violation of the ethics requirements. So I think this statute in particular places a burden on local boards of education, whereas the PSC is just for those folks who have a certificate.
You also get a report of, from a student, sexual abuse by a teacher or anyone else. You have to report that within 24 hours. You don't do an investigation of it, you report it. Now, the principal then has to take it on to social workers, the police, or whomever. So, that's not a choice that you have with that.
Questions for Betsy?
On the 2014-33 student performance data and student completion attendance like that, couldn't they combine some of that reporting with some of the other? Looks like you've got similar information going to different areas and different statutes for different, but it's the same data essentially. Could they be combined and submitted to the agency that maybe you have one extra line going to an agency that
Probably so. They might be better able to answer that than me. I believe it's all done electronically now anyway, but regardless of kind of where the statutory requirement comes from. But
we're sending duplicate data sets in different formats.
That's all of those different statutes. Don't correct me if I'm wrong. All of those different statutes are all collected via the student record database. It may go to different places to meet different requirements in the statute, but we do this part of student record.
So you're down on it. You're down on it.
Data that we talked about earlier, the completion rate data that we talked about earlier, the student achievement as far as grades for each course, attendance in each class, and all those things are all part of that summer student record.
So you're going to break it up and send different parts of it to different.
We send it all to you.
Just send it all to everybody.
Of course, a great deal of this depends on the sophistication of the system in terms of the data collection. So if you have a good system for data collection, you've got your own student information system, so to speak, then you can download any part of that and answer any one of these questions without additional or duplicative efforts.
Thank you. Mr. Kirby,
Thank you all.
out of the district board.
You mind if I use this podium?
Have a seat.
I'm just used to it, having a podium. I did want to thank you all for letting me come here today and show you, this is the chart that I'm working off of. I hope everybody has a copy of it.
We have a few, they're not stapled together here, but there's, I'll check.
Corey was with the Department of Gang said they're the attorneys for a little over 100 school systems. Thursday, they had a review and back to
Does everybody have a copy? I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. My name is Corey Kirby. I'm a lawyer with the firm of Harbin and Hartley, and we represent school districts. That's all we do is represent school boards. Mr. Dixon asked me to come today, and I appreciate it.
Actually, he did a little faster. They don't only represent school systems, they represent, what, about 100 and something, 130 of them now?
Yes, sir.
In the state of Georgia?
Yes, sir, we do. We represent a few of them. We do. It is our pleasure to represent them. But Mr. Dixon asked me to put together a chart, and the chart that was just discussed has several of these on here, so I'm not going to belabor the point. But this chart was what we tried to do is come up with those requirements for those required reporting for those reports that may be made from a school district to an outside agency other than the Department of Education, etc. And there are two particular ones that I'd like to talk to you about because we see, or at least in our experience and our clients' experience, those are the two that seem to cause some difficulty. The first one was mentioned. It's the second one on the first page as suspected child abuse. It's 19-7-5. Certainly there's not a single one of our clients or anyone in this room who would not want to report any type of child abuse. Sexual child abuse, physical child abuse. There's not anyone in here who would say it shouldn't be reported. And I'm certainly not here saying that it should not be reported. What I'd like to point out is a difficulty with the statute as it's written. And give you an example of where our clients run into some difficulty and where we receive questions for that. Before I begin, though, I just thought you'd like to see the chart, how we've set it up. I think it's helpful. The statute is over here on the far left, which would require it. Then who must report or who may report is the second column. The third column is what they are to report. The fourth is how they report it, or at least a standard way of how they report it. Certain protocols can be initiated in local areas which would modify that. And lastly, any immunities or penalties that are associated. 19-7-5 requires educators, and primarily those folks who have a certificate from the Professional Standards Commission, to report child abuse. Now, on the page 3, I've tried to put definitions of child abuse. I apologize for being so unyieldy, but otherwise I would have to bring, and I did actually bring the code sections, my Title 20 as well as 2 Title 16, so I thought this was probably a more efficient way of doing that than providing you with a hunk of statutes. But in any event, the issue that school districts run into is the following. And I'm going to give you an actual example that I dealt with last month, because I think it's very important. I had a middle school counselor call, and the counselor was working with a female student. She was 15 years old, actually 15 years and 9 months. Okay? She'd been continually working with this young lady through several issues. As 15-year-olds tend to do, she's full of a lot of angst, and she just needed someone to talk to. The counselor's that person to talk to. The counselor will always start talking with students about what we say in here will remain confidential, and I will keep it as confidential as I can, except when you talk to me about things where you're going to hurt yourself or other people. I'm going to have to let somebody else know. Or where you tell me you've committed a crime. I'm going to have to let somebody else know. Other than that, I'll try my best to keep it confidential. So this young lady started pouring her heart out to this counselor. Talked about how nobody else understood her. Her parents didn't understand her. Some of her friends didn't understand her. The only person who, by the way, understood her was her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was 17 years old. And walking along after several weeks of having these types of conversations, the young lady confessed, or not confessed, let's say, she admitted that she and her boyfriend had sexual relations. My question that was posed to me, and I guess the question I would pose to you is, does this counselor now have to report that 17-year-old young man under the child abuse statute for sexual child abuse? It's very interesting. You all seem very puzzled. I was very puzzled. And quite honestly, the district attorney in the county was very puzzled. The difficulty is this. Under the statute, and based on the district attorney's reading, the answer would be yes. You would have to report that young man. Because the age of consent is 16 in the state of Georgia. If you're not 16, then according to the district attorney, you can't consent, which means it was forcible. Even though the young lady could sit there and say, no, I wanted to have sex with my boyfriend. She's under the age of 16, she can't consent. So then that puts the counselor in the position of telling this young lady, working through this little time, we're going to keep things confidential, but now she has to report. And now that 17-year-old young man may face criminal charges under this child abuse statute. That's a very difficult position to be placed in as far as a counselor. And that's just one issue. You can have any number of issues. You have retired teachers, educators here. You have current administrators here. I welcome you all to bring other stories that you've had in situations like this. It's not just counselors. It's teachers, it's administrators, middle school people in particular, middle school students in particular, have no compunction about coming up to them and talking about their personal life. And Dr. Brown can attest to that, I assume. But it's very important. Sorry.
Someone's blackberry.
Okay. But in any event, I think it's very important that you all understand the difficulty of that and the confusion of that. I know that there is at least one legislator who is looking into trying to clarify that. I have seen the proposed bill, and it does tend to help out with that. Pardon?
Tell them what it is.
Mr. Dixon's the one who's done that. And I've looked at it. As a matter of fact, I've passed it on to several district attorneys, and they all seem to think that would be a very good fix to this particular issue. So that's one area that we see. The second area, at school or at a school function. So it doesn't have to be at their home school. It could be at an away football game. Or it could be when the Beta Club comes to Atlanta for an overnight debate or anything of that nature. In any event, you can see I've listed it out under what to report. Certainly I don't think there's a single school district who would not want to report something like aggravated assault if a firearm is involved. That's not a problem. Okay? That's not the issue. What is the issue is the third bullet point down, which talks about sexual offenses under Chapter 16 of Chapter 6 of Title 16. They include certain types of sexual offenses, which again are not a problem: rape, aggravated sodomy, these types of issues. The one issue that does come into play, and some of you may have read about it in the last couple of years in newspaper articles, has to do with sexual battery. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I put the definition of sexual battery, I did, on page 3. And as you can see, it's 16-6-22.1. You commit it when you intentionally make physical contact with another person's intimate areas of the body without the consent of that person. And those areas, just for everybody, the chest of the female, the genitalia area, the buttocks area, the inner thigh of an individual. Imagine, if you would, again, I pick on middle school because my wife is a middle school teacher. Middle school, every day there are sexual batteries that occur in middle school. Every single day. A young man touches the rear end of a young lady. Now, as I described the definition to you, if it was intentional and she didn't ask him to touch her rear end, then it apparently is a sexual battery. And if a teacher is aware of that, they have to make a report. If the custodian finds out that that's the case, they have to report it. And they have to report it to law enforcement and or the district attorney. We've run into situations where this has happened. And it's important that the code section actually says has reasonable cause to believe that this occurred. And that's the same type of language that's used in 19-7-5, is whether these people who are required to make these reports have a reasonable cause to believe. That's a legal term, but basically I don't know any other way you can have a reasonable cause to believe unless you do some type of investigation. Okay? I can't think of any other way. However, our counterparts in the district attorney's office says that's not the required way that this should happen. As a matter of fact, when the allegation is made to a teacher, when the allegation is made to an administrator, at that point in time, the school district must report it. They have no business in determining whether there is reasonable cause to believe. If an allegation is made, the report must be made then. Under that type of situation, if you have a district attorney in your area that requires that, imagine the number of phone calls that could be made from a school district to a district attorney about that exact incident. I had just last week a situation where 2 4th grade students were involved. And it was a 4th grade girl and a 4th grade boy. This way it was the other way around. The 4th grade girl placed her hand on the 4th grade boy's rear end. Okay? We're equal opportunity. At that point in time, in that school district, in that county, that assistant principal, when he was made aware of that, had to make a report to law enforcement and the district attorney. Now what's become of it, I don't know. I don't know if the district law enforcement sent a sheriff out there to investigate this. I hope they did. That's what's required by the code section. But that's the issue that school districts currently are facing, school administrators and teachers are facing, is if they see this, if they're walking down the hall and they see this, they have to report it. If they don't report it, folks, there are criminal consequences for this. They themselves can be brought up on charges for failing to make a report. We discussed 19-7-5 in the PSC. Actually, we discussed it in terms of making the report if a teacher is alleged to have made alleged criminal conduct. But if you look on the last page, page 4, the very last column, you'll see failure to make a required report under the Georgia Professional Standards Commission in Standard 9. And you can go through there and you can see that if you fail to make any one of these required reports, and if you look under what's reported, you can see I gave the example of 19-7-5 in child abuse. Then that individual could in turn be reported under the PSC for failing to make a report. And that individual who failed to make the report could be punished, I guess, by the Professional Standards Commission in terms of they can revoke or suspend the certificate, they can issue a warning, or they could monitor the person. So those are the areas that we see that tend to be difficult for educators, or at least the educators we represent, to address when it comes to these mandatory reporting, requirements. Does anyone have any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Now, the bill that our legislative council has drawn up only addresses the issue of mandated reporting of sexual conduct between students who are consenting.
And keep in mind, this is not just a middle school or high school issue. In actuality, elementary school and even younger age, kindergarten age students are acting out things. And if that happens, and an educator is made aware of it, they have to report it.
you have any idea how many these instances reported each year? Do I have any statistics on that?
I certainly don't, no sir. I can tell you in certain counties, every single one of them reported, and in other counties, not every single.
Common sense makes some difference, right? Sometimes.
Pardon?
Common sense sometimes by the teacher or whatever makes no matter. You know, what again, is when you're talking about the elementary kids, first and second graders, I think most of us have had kids, and one thing or the other, and of course you try to raise them right, but there again, unfortunately we have our TV programs and everything else. I don't know, but sometimes it's not meant to be what it seems.
But I don't think the intent has anything to do with it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's when it gets too far.
In partial answer to your question, I think, though, it's not just, the issue isn't just common sense. If you've got a system, as has occurred up in my part of the state, where for whatever reason, whether it's law enforcement or district attorney or whoever, somebody presses the issue, and a teacher or an administrator or a board member or whoever ends up in trouble because they didn't report something that common sense would tell you shouldn't have been reported. But once that person becomes a public figure because of it, what happens then is everything gets reported because nobody wants to be the next one in the paper.
Well, my daughter is a special ed teacher, and of course, she is in contact with the DFACS and does reporting. And she is in that age group, the first, that's kindergarten through fourth. But a lot does go on. So I understand.
And I think Mr. Dixon's point is well taken. The difficulty is, depending upon the particular county administrator, and I'm certainly not going to place everything on the district attorney or law enforcement, it's clearly child abuse is more pervasive now. And they want to do everything they can to stop that. And I have no problem with that. The difficulty tends to be with the common sense issues. And the problem is just what Mr. Dixon said. When an administrator does take the time to use the common sense to look into it, that's when they're out there on that limb on their own. And if they get cut off, then everybody pulls back to the truck and everything seems to get reported. Everything gets reported.
Well, yeah, from that standpoint, you're right.
And it doesn't have to be law enforcement or this attorney that causes the problem. It could be the local newspaper.
Oh, a very disgruntled parent, disgruntled employee can push the issue to the point where the machine gets in motion. And once the machine gets in motion, it's very difficult to stop.
You give us a problem. What's the solution?
One of the solutions, and I'm not here to tout this, but I do believe bills and legislation like Mr. Dixon, I do believe is a very good start on at least addressing the issue involved in 19-7-5. The problem with the reporting requirement under 1184 is more difficult. We have language that says reasonable cause to believe. And I don't know if we can, in some way, shape, or form, define that a little better, or after investigation, or something of those lines. I just think the language could be tinkered with to be a little clearer, a little more helpful, at least from the school district perspective.
Okay. Chairman Dixon, he's addressing 1184 or
No, sir. He's addressing 19-7-5, child abuse reporting. That may be a good idea.
Mr. Chairman, if there's a way to restructure that bill to allow administrative determination of intent, because currently, child brings a knife to school that meets the definition of a weapon. Doesn't matter where they left it in their book bag or going hunting Saturday night or not. We have reasonable understanding to believe it's there. I mean, it's physically there. Doesn't matter why it's there. Whether he's mad at anybody, whether he pulled it out, whether he threatened anybody, it's just present. And so if we could have some discretion in investigating and determining the intent prior to making the report, certainly help with some of these common sense issues.
It's probably a separate bill, but we certainly looked at it.
Does that go back to a federal issue of zero tolerance? So does that come down to the federal government zero tolerance issues, or is that pretty much our own thing?
It's for what he was referring to, the weapon type of issue, the knife issue, that's a local district local school. The difficulty, and I'm not going to pick on it, but the difficulty with that is when you're trying to address intent. It's so factually specific that what you wind up doing is then placing your administrator out in the open for everybody else to pick at and shoot at.
You get the accusation that, well, that staff member's son didn't have it in
Exactly.
mind, did he?
Or have to be the local.
And of course, we understand that that's a shot we would have to take. This certainly gives us some protection from that. Well, Ms. Teacher, I'm sorry, your son had an out of school, I've got to report it to the district attorney. But anyway, somewhere along the line, somebody has to come and say, this kid didn't do this. There was no intent. So it becomes a problem for the DA to drop the charge. Or somebody has to decide and use common sense, whether it's at our level or the
Anything else? Thank you all for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. Well, you and Sarah, you both given us some work to do here. Let's change our agenda just a little bit. I see that Representative Banfield's come in, and we'll move to the gender equity issue to accommodate her. If you want to come up here a minute, if you don't mind. We had a fairly extensive discussion on the issue of the gender equity in sports. We have brought some information that we can hand out to the committee members. I don't know if we put that in your folders or not. The issue that I think is relevant for this committee is not the issue of gender equity. Okay, I think we need to make that disclaimer right again. We're not here to talk about whether gender equity is a positive or negative or anything else. All we're interested in is the reporting requirements that are part of that process. And as Ms. Howerton pointed out in her report, the code section requires the State Board of Education to annually report to the legislature, and I think that report probably goes to the Speaker.
We send it to the Speaker, the
Lieutenant Governor.
yes, the
Chairmen of the House and Senate Education Committee.
exactly, and the Eric Johnson as well.
Okay, the majority leaders.
Right. And then the governor.
And the governor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, lieutenant governor as well, because the law states, gives us a chain to send it to.
In order to prepare a report that goes to them, it requires a substantial amount of information to come from local school systems. And in fact, just the manual for preparing that report is 63 pages long.
Mm-hmm.
I know because we tried to print it out last night. So it is a lengthy report. I have some question as to how much it's used once it gets to the legislature. But it's part of the discussion. I thought it was important to bring in Representative Banfield because before my time in the legislature, but I understand this was an issue that you brought to the legislature, so I want to give you a chance to talk to us about it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate y'all inviting me. Kathy Ash was my co-sponsor. I'm sure you tried to contact her. She's been in the hospital and is recovering. Otherwise, I'm sure she would have been here as well. I'd just like to hear the debate. I do know after the bill passed, Kathy and I were the co-sponsors, Representative Ash and I. And I think we can all agree that it's good to promote gender equity in our public school system. And what prompted the bill was an in-depth analysis of the rates of participation for girls versus boys in our public school system that was done by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And it was showing participation rates by boys of upwards of 70% and girls of 30%. And so clearly there was an inequity. And the thrust of the bill was not to say that we have to spend equal amount of dollars, but that we want equal participation or opportunities to participate. So even if it's not, not every girl is participating, every boy, but that they all have an opportunity to participate. And in order for the law to be effective, we had to have some way of monitoring it. I know we certainly never anticipated that the manual on how to do the reporting would be 600 pages. That does seem excessive. But I don't know all the details. I do know after the bill passed, it was in 2000 the bill passed, and I did attend a couple of the hearings in this room on reporting requirements. And there was a lot of input across the state on how we should best report the levels of participation. I've also attended a couple of seminars that have been done for athletics program directors in the public school system on how they should comply with the law. So I know that there's been a lot of effort in compliance. I've also talked to some of the folks at the DOE just in a couple of years about the level of participation. There has been schools not sending in their data. And last I checked, there was just one person kind of making those calls over at DOE, the attorney, and I'm sure it's still the same person a couple of years ago. And they were having to make calls to the different schools and please send in your report, please send a report. And it was only after prompting from me, and I was prompted by Ann Harper, the former leader of the Atlanta School Board, who's very proactive in this effort. So there are really some issues with reporting. The schools are really sending in this data, and perhaps making it easier to report would encourage higher compliance. But I do think the reporting is critical, because if a complaint is brought against a school system that girls are not, or boys, that a gender is not being given opportunity to participate in sports, the only way for a school to protect itself and defend itself against this claim would be to have the data. And irrespective of the state law aside, there's federal law and potential federal litigation. So it's in the school's best interest to keep this data, but whether the current method is the most efficient way, I'm sure that's what the committee is looking at. And I appreciate you bringing me into the process. I'd love to make it an easier process for them.
One question I have when I looked at it, and I agree, there's certainly some validity in that information you gather, particularly in the first 3 or 4 years as you build some history of where we were. Whether or not going forward it would be sufficient to say that the reports would be required from local systems when there has been a complaint. I mean, to have the information, it's not a matter of the information doesn't get generated just because of the report. I mean, the information is out there in their financial records, primarily, in the records that are kept at the local school in terms of participation in extracurricular activities as part of matching your student data records, for one thing. But to require them to put together and annually send it in, I just wonder if that's necessary.
I think it's very much necessary. And there may not be an awareness that a problem exists as you look through raw figures, and suddenly you might realize that school only has 40% of the girls participating, and it could be higher, it could improve. So I think the reporting is critical. Also, we had a phase-in. I have not revisited the bill in a couple of years, so I'd have to look at it again, but we phased in implementation of the law. I do think it's important to see, the phase-in was to give the schools time to comply with the law. So you were right, the first couple of years especially were critical to see, are the schools improving in their compliance, because schools said give us more time to up our numbers for the participation rates for the girls in particular. So those first couple of years were especially critical to see an improvement. But I do think it's important to continue having those numbers and have that information. We need to see what's going on out there.
Mr. Chairman, that's the question I have. Is anybody really looking at it at the state level or any of these reporting entities? Has anybody ever looked at it and maybe report back on that question or data coming in?
I look at it, but I have a heck of a time finding it. Every year I'm like, who has this? Can I get a copy? And the speakers are saying, they all get so many reports. It gets drowned out. But I know Ann Harper, and perhaps it would be really good for the committee to hear from her as well. Former school board member in Atlanta and really spearheaded a lot of the effort for this bill. She looks at it every year. And if the schools haven't reported, she calls, do you know so-and-so hasn't reported? And she lets me know. And I know there's at least one reporter with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution communicates with me fairly regularly about whether the data is out there and available. So there are some people looking at it.
Is it being used to just to look at the reports? So here's the data, but is any actual use to the reporting? Is the school system? I'm reading through here now that we are going in. We have these tally sheets included in the Integrated Support Resource Manual. You have the information feeds for the school system. See if you've got, based on the results of a qualified survey, local boards determined that there's sufficient interest to fill in particular scores. I mean, they could be going through doing all that. But once the, if there's sufficient interest, then they have a team. If there's not, then they don't participate. But then they got to do the compliance report. I mean, we really want to get bogged down in all the details of how the school system and seeing that they're complying with all these issues.
Now, the survey only goes into effect if there's interest in creating a new sport.
New sport.
So that can be or could be a lot of time involved in putting that together. But I don't know how often the schools had to do a survey. I don't think the survey is part of what they have to report to the state.
No, so they don't report the survey, I don't believe. And the survey only kicks in if somebody requests, if you have a certain number of individuals request a new sport, then that precipitates the survey.
I haven't heard any complaints about filing the compliance report. Maybe they just haven't filtered over to me. But what the schools are actually required to report, I haven't heard complaints individually from any schools. We might need to simplify the process.
Well, I mean, the manual is long because it has so many definitions and it has copies of. I mean, this is the report itself right here. There's actually two separate reports that are required. There's a school compliance report, which then is turned into the school system to compile a school system report that is then mailed. And it includes the participation rates. We didn't make copies of all of this. It was too many pages. But it has participation rates by male and female in all of your interscholastic sports, including competitive cheerleading. Same thing for intramural sports, all intramural sports. Then it has a section on financial data where you track expenditures broken down by gender, male, female, in terms of athletic administration, coaching compensation, extended pay, other salaries, benefits, tutoring for athletes, purchase services, transportation, team travel expenses, equipment supplies, uniforms, facility and equipment rental, publicity, medical and training facilities and services, other expenditures, capital expenditures. And it includes not just money that's spent by the school itself, but any money spent by booster clubs or local citizens. If I remember back when I was helping the local schools fill it out, the definition went on to say if the local newspaper prints a schedule for your teams, that counts as somehow gets factored into the financial data. Then there's questions that have to be answered on equal opportunity data, and then information on complaints.
My question is, who takes that data, looks at it, and goes back and says, okay, this school needs to make a change, we need to do something with it? I mean, all the data is great to have, but who's actually going to use it, do anything with it?
Of course, the school, I have not seen the report, so I don't, the report that comes to the legislature, does it have any information on individual school systems, or is it summary data?
What I've seen is the individual
association collects the data and sends it to DOE.
And that's a different report.
Who does that now?
No, it goes directly to the
There are two different gender equity reports. The one that is handled by the Department of Education is handled through our legal division, and Julie Lewis is here to answer any questions with us.
We receive school-by-school level data, and we just now have an individual who reviews the reports on a school-by-school basis. And what we do is if we see a really large discrepancy in how the money is being spent or how the money is being allocated, and this is the first year that we've ever done this, then what we have been doing this year, I just took this over this year, it's been handled by different people in the past, is we contact the sports equity coordinator at the school, and we send them some guidance, and we try to work with them to understand what Title IX requires, to understand that it's not about spending the exact equal amount of money on boys and girls sports, but that is one of the things that they will look at. We try to say, are you accommodating the needs and interests? It's usually the female athletes that are they're spending a lot less money on the female athletes. Are you accommodating the needs and interests of your female athletes, and how do you know that you are accommodating the needs and interests of your female athletes? And then we try to send them guidance. We send them the OCR manual that they would use to investigate complaints, so that they know what the OCR investigators are looking at when they come in to do an investigation. We have started going around the state and doing some training for certain school systems that have either asked us to do training or have had complaints filed, or in the example of Bartow County, we've had some litigation. And I think that the report that you get is a higher level report. It's not on a school by school basis, and I think that there is a lot of confusion in the school system on how to fill out the report. The woman, the paralegal that we have working on the report, who I am happy to bring in here, it communicates with the sports equity coordinators on a regular basis, trying to help them understand what they're doing, trying to help them input the data, which has given me great concern over what it is they've been doing in the past years. If we're in this year and they're still not understanding what it is that they're supposed to be doing, what's expected of them in entering the data to generate this report. We still, right now, it is, of course, September 12th. They were already supposed to have submitted these reports, and we have a very large number of school systems that have not reported their data to us. And so right now I'm working with our paralegal Miriam Brodkin to figure out a way to contact those school systems and contact those sports equity coordinators to ask them why they haven't submitted their report.
This will just come in Europe or past previous year?
It's the report that they were supposed to have submitted to us by August for the last year. And it's the report that we need to get to you. We would need to get to you by October.
Back in our flight.
Okay. But if I understand what you're saying, up until this year, basically, y'all didn't do anything but compile it.
That's my understanding. It was the report was overseen by a different attorney within the Office of Legal Services who is no longer at the department. I just took it over as of December of last year for this year, and we brought on a new paralegal this year who is working with the school system, working with them on a daily basis on everything from substantive issues with Title IX to technical issues on how do I fill out this report, how do I access the report online, because they go to my DOE on the website. So she's been dealing with it on a daily basis, and I'm happy to bring her in here also if you'd like to speak with her.
If there are questions, we didn't go right to it on your website. I can tell you that. We were trying to find it yesterday.
It's on the portal, and we made all the sports equity coordinators and the superintendents of the systems aware of how to access it, where to access it, how to fill it out.
I told Stuart Bennett yesterday you might want to update it because it does say at the bottom of it, a previous state school superintendent's name on the bottom of it.
That's previous.
Obviously, has to look at it while.
I don't know which draft copy they provided you, though.
This is the one I copied off of your website.
It's a prior report.
I downloaded from your website. Did you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to add some comments, if I may.
Sure.
First, I'm just thrilled that you're here and taking over this endeavor, and that there's a paralegal working on it. Just to say some of what's gone on in the past, I'm forgetting his name. He was the attorney. He was a male attorney. Preceded you, Justin? Judd Turner. That's who I dealt with in the past. He was very helpful, but overworked. And there were serious problems. There were serious problems in the past with schools not submitting their reports on time and not having the staff to follow up on that. So I'm glad that there's a paralegal on board who's working on that. And the way the schools have completed their forms, I've actually pulled and looked at some of the individual reports in the past, and there's a lot of variety, a vast range of reporting. Some schools doing an excellent job and very detailed reports, and some schools have completed the forms. With regards to specific forms and the information they need, I think the participation numbers is pretty easy. How many girls, how many boys, or men, women in each sport, that's pretty easy. The number of complaints is pretty easy, and some of those generalized questions at the end. I think where we might need to look at making it more user-friendly is the financial data. And a lot of that is dictated by federal law. I know when we looked at putting these forms together, we looked at other states who had gender equity programs in place. We looked at their forms, and we also looked at the federal law, and we looked at data that the schools would need in the event that they were faced with a lawsuit. So that's where a lot of that's coming from. We're not trying to be overly bureaucratic. We want to protect the schools. It really wasn't for us to try to make sure we've got the data in place in the event that there is a complaint filed. How can the schools best defend themselves? So I know it seems cumbersome, but that's where a lot of that, finding the booster clubs and all that, those are factors that the law takes into account. So that's where it came from.
How many systems have been involved in litigation on Title IX issues?
Let's see, there's an attorney named Fox who does a lot of these. He might know. I know that there have been maybe some school organizations here now. There was enough that it
The
was
only
an issue.
issue that I know of recently with Bartez money.
Y'all handle them?
Not full blown yet.
Members, you feel free to talk
Trying to
about
work out.
There were quite a few that settled.
that.
Yeah, and in the late 90s, I mean, I can see if I can get that number for you. I know that it was enough that it was a concern.
Skip, you're close to this, you got anything you want to add?
You just said there's a report on citizens of Johnny's.
I can't hear you.
GHS, Georgia High School Association, just sent out a report sent it to the General Assembly, which required. First year was a 30-year report, and that's an annual report. This was 2 complaints in the last 3 years.
Local school system?
Mr. Chairman, we collect this data, whether we do it pre-complaint or post-complaint, we're going to have access to that. And I am thrilled to know that someone's doing something with it. That's never been our concern. We'll report anything up here that anybody needs, and if they want to do something with it, help us do better serve our children. It's just that we don't ever hear that somebody's doing something with it. And that's wonderful. Of course, it's also interesting to know that apparently we don't have to fill out those reports.
See, there's more coming here today. Mr. Wilkins, did you have a question?
No, I don't have any questions. I do know, I'm residing in Gwinnett County, and we have a large school system, and over the years, we have had problems in Gwinnett at some of the schools. We have a large, different parts of our county are more affluent than others, and one thing the other, but we have had some problems, and it is a concern. But I also know that this is a lot of concern too with the record keeping. It'd be nice if it was some simpler way that it could be provided. And of course, I imagine that we could still, any school or parent could still make a complaint, and it would probably come forward. But I see some benefits in it if it's being addressed here, or something's being done with it to get these schools in line.
Mr. Chairman, I got one question.
Sure.
Let's skip the reports that you guys, do y'all take the same data from the schools? Does it go to you, the same thing that's going to the state?
They gather, GHS gathers it from individual systems. I'll be happy to get a copy of it and give it to you from the high school system.
I just want to make sure we're not duplicating the effort or duplicating reports here.
We probably are.
Well, that's a lot of that goes on, but I mean, that's the question I have. If we're duplicating it, it looks like one of them needs to be cut out. If you're doing the same report and providing it to us and some other folks, and the State Department's doing it, then why we got 2 separate organizations out here doing this?
They would include the private schools and the ones that come to DOE would have to do.
Right. Is both of them necessary if we're doing the same thing? That's the question somebody needs to answer. I would think.
And I guess part of my question would be, how can we streamline if we're not going to delay it or have it precipitated by complaints? Is there a way we can streamline it where it's going to be an easier process for schools to do? I mean, I've sat down and worked with the coaches when they were in Jim or Equity people in the schools when they were preparing this report, and I know it's a difficult process to go through. And deciding what is to be included, what is not to be included, not so much from school-related funds, but when you start talking about booster clubs and the individual who's out there who's not a member of the booster club but might make some kind of a donation or do something on his own, how you factor in those costs can be much more complicated than it may appear to be on the surface. So this is a DOE required report, not a legislative
I
required
need
report.
to clarify something. Are you saying, Skip, were you saying that the Georgia High School Association does this report as well?
As far as I know, it is.
Because I don't know that I've ever seen it, and the law clearly requires the department to do this. We wouldn't need a doubling of that report. We'd be glad to share our information with Georgia High
Check
School.
with Ralph, and I'm positive I do.
Okay, because this is something we can look into, and I'll get with Skip and Dr. Swearingen and see if we can look into this. And anyway, we could streamline this report to meet the letter of the law, but the law is pretty specific, is my understanding, on what the legislation demands to be collected.
That might be made by local citizens rather than school system.
Well, I do, but I actually was the attorney that worked at DOE when all this was developed. I guess I got to come clean. And I think I actually was responsible for part of that 63-page manual or whatever, so, yeah. But,
Thank you for coming clean on that.
But, yeah, I mean, Representative Denfield's right. A lot of that expenditure data is based on federal law. I mean, requiring the booster expenses and that kind of thing.
But the federal law doesn't require any reports.
No, it's only on a complaint basis.
Right.
Right.
So I mean, we got a lot of systems going through a lot of work in preparation for something that may or may not happen.
We looked at what other states do as well. We pulled, I think there were like 6 or 7 other states who had forms. Yeah. There was a lot of discussion about it.
Yeah, and some of these people in the room were were part of the group that kind of developed that. And there was a lot of leeway as far as kind of how far you can go with it or not, but to get meaningful data, I think that's kind of where we ended up. So that would be me to them.
What do you think was the intent when the report was required initially? Was it to provide protection for the school systems, or was it to find out whether or not school systems were providing equal opportunities?
I think we were looking at both, but if schools are not complying in large part because the forms are too cumbersome, then there's no benefit there. So I applaud the committee for looking at this. As we do quite frequently in the legislature, we'll pass a law or we'll pass a reg, and then we'll come back and revisit it because it's not working. And you have identified a problem because the schools aren't complying. I remember 2 years ago, Ann Harper calling me and saying that there are only like 6 schools that send in their report. So they're not sending in the data, and without the data, it's not helping anyone. So if I may make a suggestion, I'm happy to get some of the folks who are really involved. Ann Harper is an incredible resource, and getting the name, there's a coach in Statesboro. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Head of their athletic program.
I know what you're talking about, but I can't drive that.
He has lectured on completing the forms. He's wonderful. I can get his information. And he was involved in the process. You know what I'm talking about?
I remember this, and I do not recall the name, but I have another situation where a student lender forms not completed,
This coach, I'll find out his name. He was incredibly helpful, and he gives the athletic director perspective, and he was involved in the process of getting forms done. I can get his name to you, and the committee might want to hear from him. We might want to hear from Ann Harper, and get some other people who are involved in it, and come up with some ways to make it an easier form.
That basically would be a Department of Education function. I think the committee would be glad to work with y'all and in terms of providing impetus to get it done.
Well,
so basically that's going to be something that the department's going to have to do.
And we do push systems to get this report in, and our percentage is actually pretty high, I think, at the point where we transmit to the legislature. school systems that file this report with us, but I'm going to have our people take a look and do a percentage on how many systems, what percentage of systems are reporting this. Most know to comply, and they do. We have a high compliance with it.
But don't blame this committee if some system hasn't been reporting, and they certainly have to start reporting it. We don't want to take the blame for that. That's not the function of this committee.
Well, it is a lot of work now on systems. There's no doubt about it. And while we value the intent of the law and making sure that there is equity with our athletic programs, it is an extensive reporting, and it does cost some money sometimes, and it just depends on the district and what are the issues that come up. And the district I was in, just to keep peace in the family, I guess, there were times where we went ahead and put lights on the girls' softball field as well as the boys, and just to make sure that we had equal facilities down the road. But there's quite a bit of cost associated with those. But and at the end of the day, it does raise the issue, and you do take a really clear look at if you're favoring one sport over the other, or if you're trying to provide equal access for the students to athletics.
Is it agreeable with this committee that we just work with DOE in terms of revising the report? I think Skip is going to call the Athletic Association to see what.
Yeah, we have, so far we just checked that this year we've had 160 of the 180 school systems report at this point, and we're not done with the report yet. So we'll push to get the other 20 systems in so we can have 100% in this report.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may just say, with the reporting dates, I know there was discussion about that. We had the date of August 30th delivered. There was a lot of discussion about when to make that reporting date, and we made it early just for this reason, so you could say, okay, there's 30 schools out there that haven't submitted their data to give time to follow up and say, you need to comply. But I do think I would need to review OCGA 20-2-31, or 315, but my recollection is this is all DOE regs. I don't think that there is a legislative fix that we're looking at.
There's a copy of the legislation. It is. And I think it's the last page is where it talks about the report the DOE has to make to the legislature and what's to be included.
My recollection is all the discussion about the specifics of the form didn't come until a year, 6 months to a year after the bill passed. So this was not part of what we passed in the General Assembly.
Good.
And do you want me to get the names to?
If you get those two, and I might want to get with you, we may want to sit down and try and get those folks together, sit down with
Kathy Ash. She's very involved in all this.
The report that Georgia High School Association does, if there's been any new sport added, which lacrosse state championship was added, the report has to be submitted every October. They have submitted 1 3-year report, 2 annual reports, and the report also includes if there were any problems, any complaints, and if there were, what was done to correct them.
So that just deals with
new programs and any complaints from a school system to the high school. I'll be happy to get you a copy of the latest report.
That'll be fine. Thank you.
As far as
on that, and
we would be glad to work with you all in terms of the format for the report. We have tried to streamline it. Also, the reporting dates. If the reporting date, I believe the deadline I have for you all is October the 1st to the legislature. Now, we're going to run a few days behind that because our board, we always submit these reports to the state board before we send them over. Not that they vote on to approve it, but it's just we always let the state board know what we're reporting to the legislature, and they have an interest in these. This and the discipline report and the other reports. Maybe I would love, it would be good to consider that reporting date of moving it a little, maybe another month down the road, because
Is there any reason for it to come before the legislature goes back in session?
I remember extensive discussion about this August 30th deadline, but the October 1st, there was a reason why we did that, and I don't recall.
I just wanted to point out that since this legislation's been passed, of course, the school years have changed, and schools are getting out earlier and starting later, and I know that's another issue for discussion, I'm sure, but for us, it just seems to, we get a higher accountability from the school districts, a higher number of reports turned into us, and we probably need more time. We're running on a very tight timeline now. We've informed the board that we're bringing the report to them, but it'll really be October before they have a chance to look at it and then, give us the nod to go ahead and turn it in. So we do include the state board in everything that we do, and just so that they're informed in their partnership.
If you have to remember why October 1st was chosen, personally, it seems to me when the legislature goes back in session would be a more sensible time, because October 1st, you may be sending a report to people who, every 2 years, may not be there when the legislature goes back in session.
As I recall, most of them are December 30th, and there was...
Cross-country, some of those seasons, you're halfway through basketball seasons by the time you get to December 30th, and that's what we do. Okay. Any other questions on this issue?
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here. DOE staff.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Three issues there are three different reports that we were asked to address on the last meeting of this committee. First one was the consolidated application, and I have with us today Clara Keith, who's the director of our Title I, really all of our federal programs, our grant programs, and Ms. Keith is here to discuss the consolidated application and bring you the information of the department's direction on that. Also, the CPI report, the Certified Personnel Index, I guess it is. I have Levette Williams from our IT department and John Dunn from our Finance and Business Operations office here today to talk about the CPI report and bring you the data and the elements collected on that, and then the state student information system. We're here to talk about. That's the student record that has all of those elements that we collect at the end of each year. And I have Alan Meyer from the policy office and Levette Williams again here to discuss those reports in detail. And then finally, we are doing a comprehensive report on the reporting requirements in state and board rules, and we have some preliminary results, and Dr. Cassandra Herring is here too, and she will touch base very briefly with you on where we are with that report. That's a report that, and I'll address it myself with you at the end with the student information system, because we're re-examining the elements that we collect within the student record right now to make sure that we're not collecting anything that we don't absolutely need to collect. And we're developing a rationale for everything that we collect, and have done that. And we'll be able, by the final report of this committee, to be able to share that with you in written form, a complete report. You are the timing of this committee is working very well with us, because we're in the process of re-examining that for the student information system anyway. So we'll be able to complete our work for that task and this time. So, Ms. Keith, if you'd like to... Yes.
If you don't mind, some of us have been sitting down long and we'd like to sit.
Would you like to take a break?
4 or 5 minutes, no more than that.
The Certified Classified Personal Information, that's what CPI stands for. We currently collect that data 3 times a year. The type of information that we're collecting during that time, I think all of you have been given a handout of the elements. This is a glossary of the elements that we're currently collecting. The types of elements that we're collecting are things such as demographics of the staff members, certificate levels, certificate type, their job code, their employment basis, indicating whether or not they're full-time or part-time, their salary information, also each of their assignments, where they're working and the job that they have at that assignment, as well as their years of experience. There is a board rule. The board rule number is 160-5-2-.50, and in that board rule, it gives the authority of the Georgia Code that requires us to collect this information, that being some of those that we've already gone over this morning already, those being 20-2-161, 20-2-167, and 20-2-182. As I said earlier, we do collect this information 3 times a year, in October and in May. In the July collection, it is different than the October and May. At that time, we're collecting leave type information, staff leave, professional leave, sick leave type information. How the data is used. We use this information to determine training and experience dollars. The information is also used for teacher shortage areas. And for those teacher shortage areas, it benefits teachers in the field as well, especially if they're working in one of these areas, because they can get some of their Stafford loan reduced or canceled. That's a program administered by the U.S. Department of Education. And also we provide this information to PSC, the Professional Standards Commission, to determine HiQ. This goes into their HiQ system to determine that.
What's that?
Highly qualified based on their child incline.
I guess one of the questions we had when we talked about this the last time was CPI is one of those things that's been around since the sun was created. The question was, has it been revised so that it's relevant to what we need today, or are we still collecting things that may have only been needed 20 years ago? And that kind of information. I don't think we questioned the need for a CPI report, and I don't think systems want to give up their training and experience factor. But is this the most efficient way to gather the information? Is the information we're gathering all useful information that's needed?
The information that we're currently collecting is being used. Again, once we collect that information, we are passing it over to the budget office to determine the training and experience dollars. Now, as far as the changing of the collection, I've been here since 2000, and the collection has not changed very much since I started in 2000.
Chairman,
Yes.
I take it that once the school system's got most of their employees or their certified people on this report, they just have to go through and perhaps update certain sections each year. It won't update automatically. They have to go in probably and bump up their year's experience, bump up their salary level. They have to go in and update each employee or each one of these teachers manually and add new teachers, take off the old ones.
And it's basically coming out of their HR package.
Okay,
So it's an extract out of their human resource package that uploads to them.
Okay, so they don't have to go in there and manually do besides most of this data.
They would have to do it in their HR package in their system.
Okay.
And then once it's time to collect the data, they would just do an extract of what they've already entered into their system.
And this is pretty confusing. We've done this consistently the same process since 2000.
Yes, at least since 2000.
No big changes then.
Right.
This report is used to drive state funds back to the local system.
T&E dollars, yes.
You do it 3 times because back for the last system, maybe the second or third time, make up something.
And the third time is not the same data. Third time is totally different type of information. to
But it
leave.
does give them the opportunity to get up and
Yes.
benefit the system.
Yes.
In the local school system, who has access to the CPI?
It would be your, mostly your HR people.
Okay. I'm just speaking from an assistant principal's role. I have to maintain a spreadsheet of our own staff members and their credentials and all that. I have to go and manually pull out everybody's folder and update that, when it would be very helpful if I could just look at the CPI and just do that. But, you know, it takes me a half a Saturday afternoon to do that. You know,
we collect the data for every school system in Georgia,
Yeah.
we collect it, for every reporting site, which is 184 different sites for us.
Right.
We do not collect it from the schools. So
Okay.
someone at the district office has that information.
Right, okay.
Is there an element in there? Yeah. It's got a school code, so your local folks
Yeah.
should be able to drop that information down to you.
But you have to gather that and provide it to your central office for them to get it.
They're asking that, but they have it anyway.
Sometimes that's for verification purposes, though.
Yeah.
Particularly over the last few years, the fund accounting system has required more and more breakdown of teacher salaries into different funding codes. How has that complicated the CPI?
In the CPI, there's a record type called assignment record type, and in that assignment record type, we give the district an opportunity to give us up to 6 assignments for a staff member. And one of the elements that we're looking for on that assignment record is the fund code. Is it going to be funded out of state dollars? Is it going to be funded out of Title I dollars, some other federal pot of money, some grant dollars? So they have fund codes to indicate which pot of money that to come out of for each of those assignments.
And maybe partially to answer your question, I know one of the things I frequently dealt with as a superintendent was we might have assumed that the teacher was teaching ESOL, Title I, or something else, where the principal, in their infinite wisdom, may have changed that teacher assignment just a little bit, and that report that they're asking you to do becomes that verification that is what we have as a record at the central office, the same as what you're doing with the teacher at the local school level. Maybe you're still going to have to do your report.
That's my job.
Well, if they sent you a copy of that report, all you have to have it up there. Here you
Yeah.
go.
One of the changes that you asked about changes, one of the things that has changed is we have added additional job codes. As years go on, we have different types of individuals hired at the schools, so we have added job codes. And each year we meet with the Professional Standards Commission to make sure we do have all the up-to-date deal codes in our tables based on what PSE is given, as well as certificate types and things of that nature. So each year those code tables are updated based on what PSE is issuing.
Do you ever meet with folks from local systems to find out from their perspective how difficult or how easy it is to complete the CPI, sort of with a view towards us trying to find the most streamlined, effective way to gather that information?
We have not met with people in the districts as far as CPI collections. We've mostly been talking about student level data.
One of the big changes in CPI, and from a local perspective, when I work with both of them, is that high Q, the highly qualified piece, really fits together with CPI well in those 5 or 6 components, so that when we look at PSC, and we can look up, or an individual can look up under their own social security number to see if they're highly qualified or not. It'll even give them what percentage of the day they are not highly qualified. Because you can have somebody teaching 4 physics classes in one algebra 1 class and not be highly qualified for 20% of the day, because they may not have the math certificate, but they have the science certificate to teach physics. They're probably capable of teaching physics 1, but at the same time, so that those things are all, and principals have to have we have to have a sign-off sheet for every principal in the summertime of the day, yes, no, who is not highly qualified, and so on, that we have to plan for highly qualified. And And those two systems have really worked out real well. I mean, internally, instead of have to go through everything, just please look at that record. No conflict on that.
But to get to that level of information, it means taking the elementary classroom of 20 folks and determining how many EIP students are in there and getting that percentage, and how many gifted students are in there and getting that percentage, and how many special ed students are in there in the co-taught model and getting that percentage, and how many regular third graders are there. And somebody has to do that hand calculation. And that's been our difficulty with it, is having to do that level of hand calculation to get their subject code right.
In your case, with how many, yours is one of the smaller systems, so how many teachers was that?
About 100 people.
That 150, to make those kinds of calculations, that's a fairly significant time constraint there. Let alone when that counted with
15,000. We have basically one person in every building and we're responsible for that, plus somebody in the HR and somebody in the technology does that. So we're talking 45 people.
The fast-forward system, by the time you get that data calculated, you've got 5 more students in there. Instead of the classroom, so all it's relevant anyway.
For that many calculations, what do you think the margin for error is?
No, we try real hard to be at
Any other questions?
Well, what would we like to, I think it's factual system, the card system, right here, we could not have had this system.
Yeah, this particular report does a great deal of good because it's the basis for that system getting their training experience.
Is T&E vary by the weight of what the teacher teaches?
No.
And so, I know we go to a lot of it to do job codes and subject codes and those sorts of other things in there. But I didn't get a copy of this, so I may be saying something that's not accurate. If it's used primarily for T&E funding, then what does it matter if she teaches again special ed?
It's also designed, to support SACS accreditation as well. And we don't need to forget about that at one point, remember that the state had a set of state standards that SACS standards paralleled, and then the state more or less took their standards away and deferred to SACS and to the Georgia Accrediting Commission, GAC. Those are parallel standards that we use the CPI to verify that. So if we were to somehow not have the CPI, T&E aside, we would have to then redevelop a whole set of state standards and ask systems to report on to assure that teachers are teaching in the field, because now we have to support highly qualified teaching requirements as well. So it serves a multitude of purposes. I just want to remind everybody.
We do need, at his point, we do need that level of information down to the percent that are being taught, the percent of teaching time in the IEP gifted and regular students. That's all got to be for every classroom in there.
Well, it's actually going to drill deeper than that as we go further down the road with No Child Left Behind, because they want to assure that the most highly qualified teachers are now teaching the students that are in the most need, in essence. And we're going to have to look at socioeconomic and performance factors too with these students. And that's an issue that's a federal reporting issue that we think we're gathering the info for that now, but we're not sure that we aren't going to have to do a little more extensive reporting.
I think at this point, it would appear to me that there probably isn't some change that we can make in the CPI report itself, but I would encourage the department to sit down with some folks like we have here and let's look at what is the most efficient way to gather that information. Is there a way that we can modify the report so that it'll take some of that burden off at the local level, if it's possible? If it's not, then that's one of those things we're just gonna have to get the job done.
Well, we're more than willing to do that, and we are looking.
We appreciate that.
We've got several changes in our reporting systems we're working on right now in terms of we're shifting databases at the department over the next 2 years. We've got the statewide student information system that's just coming in now. We're going to be looking at the fund accounting systems as well to upgrade those from the system that's been around for 20 years. So now's the time, and we're going to be pulling together what used to be our student information system advisory group, and we're expanding that to include some finance people and some small systems, as well as the medium and large systems. And for the next year and a half, we're going to be examining all these reports in our reporting system anyway. So this is something that we will do, I can assure you.
Next.
The consolidated application with Ms. Clara Keith.
Morning. I have a brief piece of information to share with you, and then if I don't cover everything that you need, please feel free to ask questions. The consolidated application is the way that the Department of Education receives information from local school districts in order to fund these school districts. It is actually a statutory requirement. It begins in Title 1A of the No Child Left Behind Act. There are actually 10 federal programs participating in the consolidated application and one state program, which is a professional development or professional learning program. And actually what the consolidated application is an electronic way of getting information from school districts and an electronic way for the department to review that information and approve the information, including the plan and the budget, and then submitting that information back to the school districts in an electronic format. There are basically 3 major pieces of information. It is the LEA plan, and that plan is actually for student achievement, a budget, and an annual report of various programs. The plan actually can be 2 or 3. Well, actually, there is a plan for every program in No Child Left Behind, and so that would be 10 programs that are actually participating in the consolidated application. We can either ask statutorily for LEAs to submit an individual plan for every program, or we can consolidate the planning requirements. And so we have consolidated the planning requirements. We started this year with a plan that will be approved for 3 years, so an LEA will have to resubmit their plan after 3 years. The LEA can actually upgrade or update that plan, but they will not have to go back through the approval process of the plan. However, a budget is required every year, so the LEA must submit, or the local school district must submit a budget every year. Annual reports includes assessment data by subgroups, the race, socioeconomic status, those groups, and we actually do not collect that data. We being the federal programs folks, we get that data from assessment and from the IT folks. But they do have a separate reporting requirement for supplemental educational services, the number of students participating in SES, as well as the number of students participating in public school choice, the number that were eligible, and the number that actually returned away. In addition to that, local school districts also have to submit to us a survey of their homeless children, which really is a count of the number of homeless children. It's important for us to have that data because this is how we get our grant funds from the U.S. Department of Education for the McKenna-Bento program. Also, school districts have to submit to us the students that they have in delinquent and neglected institutions. This is important because these children are included in the formula account for Title 1A, which we receive our funding from the federal government in Title I on that part. So individually, if school districts had to submit an individual plan for all of the programs in No Child Left Behind, they would have to respond to 173 responses. In our consolidated plan, they have to respond to actually 31 responses. And I'm not sure if you need additional information, so please feel free to ask questions.
I visited our school system, saw all the charts they had around walls and several rooms where we kind of stayed together. Basically, it was pretty much a nightmare right now trying to get it going. The prayer that they have is that once we get this thing set up, we're going to leave it in place for a few years without having to go back and make new requirements each year for reporting. It appears to be in our system, they think there's a lot of duplication. We're maybe asking for some data on one report, and they turn around and have to reformat it and put it in another area over here, and it's the same data, they just have it massaged a different way. There's not some way that you guys can take that data and work with it without them having to massage it locally so much. But their biggest prayer was, don't change the format, for God's sake. If you do, ask the districts for input before it's changed. So I told them I would share that with you. But it is a nightmare, this thing.
Yes, we really are aware that it is a lot of information, and we are required by the federal statute to ask for this information, although we are not necessarily required to ask for it in the manner. The part where the school districts are really asking us to not ask them for the same data, I believe we have handled that part and provided that information on the consolidated application website, but it was all of the disaggregated data, and we actually collect that data through the report card, and it should have been made available to the school districts. In the very beginning, it was a communication gap between the consolidated application folks and what was needed in the system profile for school improvement, but we have corrected that information. And again, as I said, this particular process will be the planning piece, not the budget piece, the planning piece, which is really the biggest issue. I don't think most districts have a problem with the budget in terms of what they must submit. They may have trouble or problems in terms of when they actually have access to their money. But the planning piece will be approved for 3 years. Now, when No Child Left Behind is reauthorized, it will depend on the federal legislation. If there are new provisions added, then we will have to add that. Now, and I do want to add this point. We try very hard to not ask the school districts for any information that we don't need until we get our monitoring report or our auditing report from the feds. And we just received one in March, and we had some information that was missing, that we already knew was missing, but that was a part of our monitoring report, and we have to submit a corrective action. And our corrective action, of course, means that we have to ask local school districts to provide that information to us. If we do not submit corrective actions, then we have what is called a condition put on our grant money, which then means that we may not get it all, or it may be delayed. And so we goes down. Sorry about that.
Any other questions? Comments? Thank you.
Stuart already somewhat addressed the student information system. Were there questions about the SSIS? There was a question.
There is a question, yes. Is it going to be online this year? I have information that we were going to go back to the state. Is this the state data warehouse we're talking about?
Yes.
That's part of that.
Absolutely.
I've got that here that says that they're going to continue to have to go through the old legacy system. This thing is going to postpone again.
No, they're going to be using the student record, loading the student record as we know now, but the warehouse will replace during this school year. We will load into the warehouse, and they will use the new the data warehouse this year.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we are loading it now. Hopefully, at least by no later than January, we'll have it loaded. So we'll work with it then. We are not going to be using we're going to be using the student record, an enhanced version of it. We're not going to be collecting on a monthly basis like we had talked about. We listed the systems on that. And the legacy system will be replaced this year.
So it will be replaced.
Mm-hmm.
I will report that back.
Okay. You would?
Thanks, sir.
Okay, I'm Cassandra Heron, the Policy Director here at the Department of Education. That concludes the 3 issues that were lingering from the last meeting. And my role here today is to talk about a new piece of information that we're providing to you. You do have it in draft. It's a spreadsheet, a number of different pages. What we have done in the Policy Division is to go through a complete review of state board rules and identify all of those rules that have reporting requirements. And we did a very liberal reading of rules, so any requirement to provide information to us from the district is included in this report. Again, it is draft. We're very close to completing it, but we want to do one final scrub of the information. Again, these are reporting requirements from state board rules, so there will be some overlap from law that requires the state board to report. You'll see here in the rule that we're asking systems to give us that information, as well as any additional reporting requirements. We are not prepared at this time to go through them item by item, and I don't know if that's appropriate, but if this committee would like that information, or would like for us to do that review item by item, we can plan that for the next meeting.
There are 14 pages of this?
Yes.
Tell you what.
This is the everything but the kitchen sink.
We will, we'll try to work through this between now and the next meeting, and we'll go from there. I think part of what we need to do is we need to gather up all these copies of reports that we've got. I've got a desk full of them in front of me now. And every time we talk about a piece of legislation that's going to require a report,
We're about one of these things.
we need to hand this out to everybody and say, you really want to add to this?
Yes, everything, every report that's required in state board rules is in this document.
Are there extra copies of that?
There are not, because it's really a draft form. As we finalize things, we could borrow your list. We can certainly shoot those out to everyone who's here. We didn't want it to be finalized before we shared it.
I know a system can apply for a waiver for the election classified.
That is correct.
That's 15 days out of the year.
They can apply now. Yes.
Once the waiver is requested, how long will it take for that to be processed?
The state board rule does not have the authority to act on classified waivers until after the first FTE count. So although we're cataloging those requests at this point, we're hoping that they'll act in October. But there is no closing on that window, so school systems can apply at any time. Yes, the rule is up for adoption at this month's meeting as well as the class size process. You can talk to me.
Thank you. Stewart's left the room.
That concludes the testimony. Stewart had to leave at 11:30. That does conclude our portion, DOE portion, unless there are additional questions.
Tell them we have further reporting requirement for Stewart.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further reporting
We need a report of where you've been, Stuart.
We've had our cabinet meeting going on. I had to go in and present there as well.
Can I ask you one more question? I hate to do this, but just going back to that student information system. I missed the paragraph here, part of my letter that said they had spent our system over a year in preparation for the new monthly reporting. They made changes, incurred expenses in their software, they paid for training, reassigned duties, moved people around, everything else. And now they're told that this report's not going to be done monthly, and that's what you just said. So there's a requirement.
That was something that I'm getting from the school districts, that they don't want to have to report that much. And we're looking into the need of having that reporting. That's part of what we're looking at now. And
They were told, when were they told?
I know, I understand they were told that, but the question becomes, you know, do you just jump on over the cliff now?
No, I agree with you.
And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to be responsive to our districts and realize that we are trying to answer that question now. And we did ask it early on. There was a sense of which the architecture committee or the design, they felt like they needed to under the new system, require that kind of reporting. But then as we began to push, the answers just weren't there. And we were having, it was hard for some of the smaller districts to design those templates and to get them loaded in. And we're wondering now, if we keep moving forward with this, are we going to end up in the same place? Because we have a robust extraction tool now that works. So what we're going to do is take the best of the new and the new, because they're both new, and combine it into one system that's more convenient for our districts. And they'll report to us less frequently. And if we don't need to get a monthly report, why are we gathering the data?
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
And I'll admit, I'm part of the fly in the ointment because I came in and asked those questions. And when I didn't get the answers that I felt were the answers that I needed, we just decided to take a look at the tool that we've enhanced over the last 3 years to collect data for our AYP determinations. Now, I will tell you this, that we are also asking the systems, and we're working with the systems on any costs incurred, and we're going to be working with them on that because the costs are minimal compared to the whole project. And the major piece of the project is there and is working very well. The data warehouse is there, the design and the architecture of the data warehouse is the right design. The GTID, the Georgia Testing ID system, is working, and we had to put a couple of patches on it with any new software out there. But that's going to be very important for us tracking data, tracking our students in the future and knowing where they are and being able to make sure that all the services and the funding is following these students. We're getting that in place, and the last piece is the extraction tool. And we were going to go to all the efforts in paying for a new extraction tool when the one we had was working very well, and it was such a small piece of the whole state ID system. So we're marrying the two, if you will. And we won't be requiring reports from our districts once a month. It's too expensive and it's too labor intensive, especially for our small districts. So we were trying to be responsive. And so our goal is to, by mid-year this year, to load the 05-06 data into the warehouse. And then at the end of the year, collect the 06-07 data and put it into the warehouse as well. In our original plan, we would have just had the 06-07 data as we loaded it this year in the warehouse. Now we're going to have 2 years, and then any other years we can backload into it. Another question we had, Representative Maxwell, was that the system that we put in place had a much more robust scrubbing. We had a much more valid data coming in. And we really we're really a stickler about having valid data because so much rides on it, such a huge budget rides on it. And so we are utilizing some of the old data checks on the back end from the old systems to just make sure that we're going to check it on both ends. When we collect it, there'll be edit checks to make sure the data is accurate. Then before we load it into the warehouse, it'll go through a second set of checks and then go into the warehouse so that we can assure everyone that the data is accurate and it's been matched to an ID for every student and teacher, really, at the end of the day. So that and then we've got another system called Cognos that we are going to be putting in place, and that's the reporting piece where people can develop their reports, school districts, even teachers. You'll also be able to go into our website. The parent will be able to click on a district and drill into data right from a Georgia map. That the data warehouse will be backing that. All of that comes into line and into place this year as part of the state student information system. Now again, we're pulling our districts in, and we're saying to them, look, here's where we think it's running smoothly, here's where we're hearing their problems, and we're going to ask them to work with us on addressing the problems. Anytime you bring something this large in, I think where they failed in the past is when the department failed to complete the implementation project working with the district. And we're trying not to repeat history again. And so that's an update that we will give our board this month, by the way, as well. You heard it here first.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Stuart. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Next on the agenda, we appreciate you all being patient. I know it's been a long morning for you all to sit here. We have representatives first from Page and then from GAE.
I'm the current Page president. I've been a classroom teacher for 19 years and National Board certified, and this is my 3rd year as assistant principal. And as you know, usually the assistant principal is the one in the school that usually does all the things that the principal doesn't want to do. Therefore, I am typically the one that does a lot of the paperwork. So I feel like it was an appropriate place for me to come this morning. We do appreciate this opportunity to come before you on the subject of reporting and paperwork, two aspects that are very important part of public education here in Georgia that our 65,000 members across the state run into every day. Before I go through these questions, I'll just kind of address a few of the things that had come up earlier. In reference to Mr. Kirby's statements, he talked about some of the requirements that we have for child abuse reporting, sexual battery reporting. As an assistant principal at a middle school, he is right. I deal with that each and every day, and it's going to increase my workload. It's going to decrease my workload tremendously if I can just pick up the phone and call the police department every time somebody says, "Hey, so and so touched me." From my experience, our law enforcement, they're not really aware and they're not really appropriately trained on the protocol about what they're to do. I know that, when we catch kids with dip and tobacco and cigarettes, we're automatically, we have to file a juvenile complaint. And they tell us, consistently, if you have punished them at school, the judge is reluctant to punish them further because they've received punishment at school. So, this may be something that we may want to work with in terms of law enforcement, because it's going to have to work together. And from my experience, I don't think they know exactly where they stand and exactly where we stand in terms of our requirements. The Law 20-2740, the Disciplinary and Placement Actions Report, I know that that's required by the LEA to report. However, there are a lot of federal reports that you have to do that kind of mirror some of the same information. However, it's asked in a different way. For example, I needed to do a report on that information in order to talk about equity and that sort of thing. That disciplinary actions report didn't give me the data that I needed, so we had to print out a large stack and go through and manually count. And it took myself and a secretary the bulk of a day to compile that data. So there's so many federal requirements. It would be great if we could get our state requirements and our federal requirements to be similar, so that there wouldn't have to be a duplication of efforts to gather that. I'm going to switch back and go back to our survey, which we've given you. We recently surveyed some of our members and asked them 10 questions. Number one, other than grades, which are the top 3 most time-consuming written reports you're asked to produce during the school year? Number 2, what's your understanding of the purpose of these reports? Number 3, how do these reports benefit your classroom? Number 4, what's the frequency with which you must make these reports? Number 5, who requires these reports? Number 6, do you ever get any feedback on these reports? Number 7, in your view, are these reports critical to instruction and student achievement? Number 8, if they're not critical to instruction And what do you see as the purpose of these reports? Question 9, naming the additional written reports you're asked to make during the school year. And number 10, can you suggest less burdensome alternatives to these reports? We did receive many responses, which are compiled for your report today, and we're going to share these with you today. What first?
Let me ask you a question about that.
Okay.
They've already given us this. Is the number one response to question 1 and number one response to question 2, are they consistent across there so that we can kind of, when the first one is what are the top 3 most time-consuming reports, and then it talks about what is your understanding of the purpose of these reports. It's helpful if we know that response 1 ties back to response 1 on the first question.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying.
In other words, the first response to question 1 says annual report for council
Yes,
duties.
they should tie back, at least in the beginning. We have some people who fail to answer all the questions in our survey, but these should pretty closely mirror each other. We consolidated this way because we thought it would be a better organizational tool for y'all, but they should pretty closely refer back question 1, response 1 to question 2, response 1, if that's what you're asking.
That's what I'm asking.
The 3 most time-consuming written reports that our members said were student support team reports, that's often referred to as SST, paperwork related to student IEPs, that's individual educational plan, which is a component of special education, and 3rd, documentation of disciplinary reports. And I think we've spent quite a bit of time talking about disciplinary reports earlier. The first 2 really are probably federal requirements, and at this point there's not a whole lot your committee can do to that, so I want to focus on some of the issues that you can. Question 2, most of the respondents believe that the purpose of the report is to document and provide accountability that proper procedures were followed. Question 3 asked, did the reports help classrooms? About 1/3 of the respondents said that they were of absolutely no help to them. But 2/3 did indicate that the reports promoted focus on some of the larger picture and student learning goals. So 2/3 of our members thought that they may have some value. Some even reported that the reports helped teachers work as teams in tackling school problems. The 4th question dealt with the frequency of the reports, and those varied widely in terms of weekly up to annual. Question 5, the answers to the question who requires these reports indicate considerable uncertainty. Many respondents said the report was a county requirement. Others reported they believed that the State Department required the report, while others, citing special education reports, noted the federal government requires this report. One response was very typical, and I'll just read it verbatim. The central office says the state requires it. The central office says the state and the feds require it. The central office requires it because they will not do them. And I think to add to that, I think there's a considerable amount of confusion among educators about who is asking for the report. The majority of teachers do not know. Is this a county? Is this a state? Or is this a federal requirement? I would say that a lot of them just do not have that information. At this
Tell them it's the central office.
At this point, I'd like to allow Ken Russell to come up to the podium, and he'll introduce himself. He's going to cover the last few questions, and then we'll be available to answer any questions.
Good morning. I'm Ken Russell, and I am currently teaching U.S. History and U.S. Government at Somerville High School in Gordon County. I'm a 25-year teaching veteran, and I'm National Board Certified, and I'm the immediate past president page. As we were listening this morning as a high school classroom teacher, and I can think about numerous asides in the hall and talking to my colleagues, and I'm a former department head from a few years back, and hearing some of the being the conduit between the administration and between my social studies teachers. This is an area that we're very concerned about, and also being somebody who's teaching for as long as I have. It's my life, it's my career, and there's certain aspects of the career that we spend more time with, certain aspects of our teaching that we spend more time with. And paperwork is one of those necessary things, but it's also one of those things that we want to streamline. We want to see done as effectively and efficiently as possible so that we don't take up class time with the needs and concerns when we need to be working with the needs and concerns of our students. So I'm very excited about this committee's research and looking at helping out the classroom teacher, because this is definitely a need that needs to be dealt with. Question 6 is, do you get feedback on any of these reports? And actually, this was of the items on the survey, this was probably the most discouraging aspect of what we've learned. And it may be where it comes in the survey. I would say lots of folks probably got through points 1 through 5 and were excited about it, but probably had a lot of other things they needed to be doing, paperwork or other aspects. And this one and the rest of the items on the series were completed by people who were seriously interested in working on this thing. Margaret pointed out to you that there were some of these items were not reported on, and maybe some folks had a response or a feeling like I heard from one of the respondents, or I heard about one of the respondents saying that they had so much to do otherwise they weren't able to spend a lot of time with this report. But anyway, many of these people felt like that they didn't get a lot of feedback from their central office probably initially and from other people higher up. And we spend a lot of time trying to encourage our teachers and to encourage our teachers to be leaders, and maybe this is probably a little out of your reign, committee members, or your purpose here, but in the effective domain, you might be aware, might point out that this is something that the local systems probably need to be working on, is to make sure that teachers are included and there's a collegial relationship going on, that any time a teacher is asked to fill out these reports, that they'll know very sure that their opinions and their viewpoints are considered and are really included in whatever reports the central office or the system come up with. Question 7, are these reports critical to instruction? About half of those who responded felt that the reports were critical, but many of these indicated it was the feedback and not so much the report itself, it was the feedback, what they felt like they were getting from the higher up, administration, central office, that made the teachers feel important and made them feel like that their data was going to be significant and could be useful. As one teacher put it, reports that are, quote, duplicated and stored in a filing cabinet, they're not very useful. And I've already alluded to the fact that the teachers don't have the time, in many cases the patience, because we're trying to be classroom teachers and trying to do our job to help our kids. Many times we feel like that this is just something that takes up time and is wasteful. Question 8, if they aren't critical, then what use are they? And it says many respondents put an NA or reiterated a vague rationale for reports that they obviously had little faith in. We want to be sure that what we're doing is worthwhile and expedient and helpful. Question 9, additional reports. And the respondents cited numerous classroom and school inventory. We've already alluded to property reports and other kinds of things that on the system level. Those come from the classroom and school levels. And I know this is a system thing, but I do know that the first day of school that we send home about 6 to 8 different items, medical reports, personal information, insurance, technology permission, et al. That needed to go home to be signed for mom and dad to look at and for the child to bring back hopefully the next class day or within the week. Those had to be collected and been sent to the office, and I assume those went on to wherever they needed to go for referencing. That's just one example of many things where teachers are involved in filing paper and these kinds of things. Question 10, many alternatives, suggested alternatives. Initially, we can add fuel to the fire for streamlining our student technology and making sure that that is definitely brought up to speed, as we've already talked about this morning and heard about this morning. The respondents wanted to see that technology would be used as a replacement and it could be used more efficiently, more expediently to get the information that needed to be done. One respondent suggested that district and school administrators do an audit for these reports, check and see which ones really are useful, and let's do away with the ones who aren't. Dr. Brown and I would be glad to answer any questions from the chair or any members of the committee.
A lot of information to digest here.
It is.
Yeah, this is really good. Thank you for compiling that.
Thank you for that copy today. I appreciate it.
President, so if you need additional information, just contact Margaret Price and we'll get it.
Okay.
Most of these are state reports that involve, the state reports are just, a lot of schools have their own reports just within the school system themselves and local schools.
There's a variety of them, I think.
Yeah, there's going to be a combination of.
I know there's too many because I hear that from my door all the time.
One of the things we're hoping that will come out of this committee will be that, as Ken referenced, an audit of everything that's going on and where you can consolidate. And I know Claire Keefe does an excellent job with the consolidation. I learned a lot today, and y'all did a great job on that. And that financial, as a former superintendent of school, you've got to have that CPI report for the system to go. But I think consolidating where you can and not duplicating.
Require school level and district administrations to follow each and every reporting plan.
If the trip's not necessary, don't do it.
That's very good. Very good for that. GAE. Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you and give you some information. To augment what you've heard, I think it's a nice compliment. And we have some more information to come. First, just a kind of overview. We did a survey and got responses from over 600 teachers all across the state. And as you can see by that opening, I think they're probably representative. We had 84 systems represented. About 60% of that, of the respondents, are in metropolitan systems. 17 of those are in the greater Atlanta area. The other would be Augusta and Columbus and Savannah, Chatham area and so on. And you can see there the breakdown by grade level, cluster school building, I guess you could call it. We asked them to tell us how much time or how frequently they spent on 6 different general areas, how frequently they did it. And also we asked them, you see those 6 areas there, standardized testing, grading, student information, attendance, discipline, and special ed. And then we added another category to allow them to fill in other. And we also set up a blog on our website, and we're culling those now. We've got a lot of responses on that, plus that other category. And we've got so much data, we're still sorting through it and actually getting some statisticians to make us stay honest on it. But so this is an overview of some early information on it. As you can see on the second page, we compiled the average time, and when they gave a range, we took the lower end of it. Those charts you see on pages 2 and 3 show how they said, how often they said they filled out that type of report. For instance, if you look at required reporting on discipline, most of the respondents said they do it on a daily basis, closely followed by those who said I do it weekly. Student information, about the same, daily and weekly reporting or updating information on that. The testing, I suspect, may not be accurate. Accurate in the sense that we asked them how much time they spent on standardized testing. I don't think there's any way they spent this kind of time on standardized testing on a daily or weekly basis. So I believe, I kind of doubt that part of that information. Special ed, about evenly on daily and weekly basis. Grading is almost all daily reporting, according to our respondents, and attendance is also. Yes.
On the special education data, were you able to separate out special education teachers from regular classroom teachers?
No, I regret we did not go in and get that kind of demographic information, because it did make you wonder, because of all the cooperation and inclusion between the special ed and the general ed teachers. We don't have it, not at this point. The most remarkable thing of trying to quantify this time is that, and I picked the time here that showed up where you'll see minutes per week. If you look at the minutes and figure those out on an average daily basis, they're spending almost 48% of their time that they're paid for on some kind of paperwork. Now, actually, they're not doing that on paid time. That's what's going on here. You know, a school year, if you call a work day 8 hours, it's typically 7.5 hours in the building. But if you call a school day 8 hours, that would come up with 190 teacher work days, a little over 1,500 hours. And this data shows that they're reporting almost 700 hours on average paperwork on these categories annually. And again, I took the conservative, if they gave a range or there was a doubt, I took the conservative estimate.
But you would assume what you're saying is that a substantial amount of grading takes place in the evening, not as part of that.
Well,
and
actually, the way we asked it, Representative Dixon, was to try to get the required reporting, not how much time do you spend grading papers, but filling out paperwork that's required for progress reports, for report cards, failure notices, that kind of thing. So we tried to stress in here reporting requirements.
Don't you think that 87 minutes per day would be a little high for
yes
required reports on grading?
Yes. I did think that. Yeah, but if you look at the choices we gave them are, do you do this daily, weekly, monthly, each grading period, each semester, annually, or some other kind of recurring schedule? And so they self-selected which way they reported it. So I looked at that's why I put these charts in here. You can see how they self-reported how often I do this type of reporting. We do need to do some more checking to tease out, is this actually grading or required reporting? The other point I want to make on page 3 is this goes with streamlining and efficiency. It's been covered in several areas of different aspects you're talking about today. Of these 6 areas, there are only 2 with significant electronic reporting according to the teachers' responses. And that is electronically 75% of the reporting on attendance and a little over half on student information. But in the other categories, and discipline was one of the big time sucks, I'll call it, taking a lot of time away, is the least electronically transmitted type of information. The one that requires the most hours is also kind of the most laborious or repetitive category. There are a couple of other things I wanted to try to give you a flavor, and again, we're going to, within the next couple of weeks, get you kind of a digest of some of the anecdotal evidence and see where the trends are and that kind of thing. Regular ed teacher, we ask them if you want to come testify or do you want your name used, sign an email. The survey, of course, was anonymous, but I pulled a couple of regular ed and special ed just to give you a little feel. This is a teacher in Cobb County, and she thanks for taking time to consider this issue and said to thank the committee. My biggest concern with paperwork I'm required to complete is all of different plans. We must write a plan for almost everything we do. Discipline plan, test improvement plan, field trip plan, lesson plans, and this goes on and on. I would estimate that I spend about 20% of my planning time each week writing these plans, not counting lesson plans. The simple writing of lesson plans, as opposed to actually creating new ideas and gathering materials, takes up an additional 20% of my planning time, because I'm not just jotting notes for myself, but instead composing a formal document that must be submitted to my administrator and could end up in my personnel file. This leaves only 150 minutes a week to plan with grade level teachers, plan with other teachers with whom I work, such as EIP, special ed, communicate with parents and grade papers and take care of all the housekeeping items that elementary schools must complete. Frankly, I have to take work home, of course, just to complete that part. In the end, then I find it hard to find the energy to improve the lessons I've been teaching for years, to implement new ideas, trainings, or prepare hands-on experiential learning activities, which take a great deal of preparation, but have been shown through research to have the best learning results. She doesn't have time, to get to that. If a teacher is competent, he or she should not be required to continually demonstrate this through paperwork that, frankly, barely is glanced at in many cases by administrators. Instead, perhaps only teachers in question, or perhaps even new teachers, should be required to write all of these plans. That way, administrators have a tool for accountability when necessary. Naturally, it's important to ensure that teachers are doing the job well. However, I feel sure that there must be ways of accomplishing this without creating paperwork that keeps otherwise superb teachers from doing their best work directly with the students in the classroom. Now, I realize more from my vantage point working in government relations that your impact on a lot of this stuff could be minimal. But what I want you to encourage, we talked about that gender equity report for an hour today and some last week. Don't forget the impact of this in terms of the total picture down there in the classroom, because the remarks that I read on our blog and another one I'll just highlight a couple of things out of and then give you some suggestions, make it really clear that this is a large part of what makes it hard to hang in there and feel like you have the energy to do what your main mission is, and that's to be there for your kids and for the parents. And this is veteran teachers are all saying it's gotten worse and worse and worse. This is a report from a special ed teacher in Gwinnett from her elementary school. She kind of polled her staff and gave a summary report. And she said she herself used up 2 planning periods this week just working on paperwork, and of course have to take a lot of work home. It seems as though everyone and everything is pulling at teachers' planning time. It's a shame. Going in services, getting higher degrees, and doing educational research means nothing if you cannot put what you learn into effect with great plans. Kind of echoing what that other teacher said from another system. So that was one of the themes I'm seeing in these. Paperwork can seriously interfere with my ability to spend the maximum time possible planning to differentiate lessons. And now she's in special ed, but she said there should be a way, because of all the extra paperwork, to develop the IEPs and so on. Another special ed teacher reported that the grade reporting takes about an hour and a half per student because of the extra reports. In addition to academic progress reports, this is a Gwinnett teacher, 4 times a year, and report cards, another 4 times a year, every student receives in the special ed program an additional progress report for each and every objective. That's a minimum of 3 with no limit on a student's IEP, a total of 8 times per year. I could go on and on, but I want to give you some suggestions to think about, and maybe consider a serious task force on this issue in cooperation with DOE and organizations. I think there are some things you're teasing out here that you can, get a lot of bang for your buck with a couple of things that affect a lot of school systems, and this is harder to get at. This burden, down on the classroom level, is hard to get at, and I think it's beyond the scope of what you can tackle given the constraints. But one idea that I thought was a pretty good one is that every form has to have on it who's requiring it and what the purpose of it is. Now that's a simple little thing. It's kind of like what you see on the tax forms now about how many minutes it should take to do this and that kind of thing. But it goes to what you heard about, is anybody looking at this? Does this really have an impact on my kids? Who's asking for it? And you heard the confusion, and it's rampant through that about who is requiring this. And, it's like that. Somebody else is. Streamlining could mean checklists and maybe in some of the special ed areas, more electronic versions, coming up with uniform form. One special ed teacher said, when we get a student in from another system, they use a different form. And you heard other kinds of things having to be translated, reformatted. What if would it be great just in Georgia if we could come up with some standardized forms, particularly electronic? And I know they're out there, the software programs that some systems are using for some of these things. So maybe a statewide kind of thing about some kind of uniformity, at least get a start on it. There is duplication. I got the feeling that in a lot of school systems, there are different people asking for things, and they all don't know how many others are asking for information. I don't think there's much of a scope even in school system level, according to what I've heard. The other thing is to focus, again, kind of on the needs. What's this for? How does this impact instruction? Student achievement. Is this really, can we connect the dots there about how this is helping? A lot of things are budgetary, and that's, you got to have a building and you got to pay the teachers what they, according to their T&E and all that. But I think that there are a lot of ways, and there may be a few that you could do in the scope of this committee, but maybe start as an impetus to carry this on and get a task force or something going, during the session. It's a long-range kind of thing, but I think it's very much worth it in the eyes of the teachers who are kind of feeling the crush of this paperwork. Thanks for taking this on and for giving us the opportunity to provide some information. We'll give you some more. Any questions? Be glad to answer.
I'll be glad to get the update on this.
All right. We'll get it ready for you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody in the audience have something they want to add before we, as a committee, make some deliberations? Yes, ma'am.
I was just interested when I heard both Page and GAE's report, what was the breakdown of the teachers who responded? Were they elementary, were they middle, were they high? And is there a difference in the times?
We did not track that.
We can. We just haven't gotten down to
We
that.
did not track that, but we also had some administrators who answered ours as well. So we had everybody, pre-K probably through administration. But we did not track it. But from some of the responses, we know some of the people who responded and we know what their positions are, but we don't have it statistically broken down.
His shows the grade level, doesn't show.
But we can track every answer back to the grade level.
I just wondered if the results were different, might require a different remedy.
Right.
If it were high school than if it were elementary.
Right. We had about a third in elementary, about a little over 20% in middle, and about 29% in high school. And we can track every answer back to what that person said about teaching position.
I would think, off the top of your head, you would think high schools would be more likely to have grade reporting electronically than elementary school. Middle schools are probably going to be somewhere split between the two.
Yeah.
So I would think grade level probably does have some impact. Certainly it does in terms of the special education questions. Good question. Yes, sir.
One of the problems that you have is not just the reporting, it is the record keeping that supports and backs up the reporting. For example, on State Board Rule IDE, no pass, no play, you not only have to make certain kinds of reports if you're in violation, but you have to keep rosters, you have to keep a ton of paperwork to support what report you're making. And but it is, I'm thankful that you guys are looking at this, and maybe we can do some check-offs, some streamlining, rather than relying on a lot of narrative and those kinds of things.
That's a good point. Others? That concludes the agenda items. I want the committee to have some time to briefly have some discussion before we break up for the day. So we'll give Representative Sanders a chance to get back. Keep in mind we are allocated one more meeting date. We know we've got the discipline thing to take up at the next meeting. But with that being the last meeting, we've also got to come to some conclusions and finalize some things by the next meeting, or else have a fourth meeting that we don't report the speaker. You turn the camera off when you say that. Yeah.
We'll try to get this report back. It's finalized by the first
Well, I'd like to have it before then, so that if there are legislative things that have to be created, that let's say council will have an opportunity to start to work on any legislative changes. And I think we've already identified a few things fairly easily. Some of the things that are just simply out of date, but the things that are going to take a little more time or a little more difficult. do we change some of the legislation as it relates to things like gender equity? Do we look at the mandated reporting as it relates to child abuse? Bill that I've got, this young lady was so kind with the bill. Hopefully we can come up with a date. We meet in October. I think November, even though I know Jill's going to get kind of tied up with the campaign in October. But if we can,
You're available anytime.
You're available anytime.
Anytime. I don't have a campaign.
Right. Was that she take that contribution to her account? Do you think you could spare half a day in October? We'll, I'll give you all a week to look at your calendars and send me a date that you think would be appropriate. After that, if I haven't heard from y'all, we're going to set a date.
Just set a date. How do that?
We need to try to summarize everything we've done at this point before we
Well, you know, when we started into this, I really hoped that we would be able to solve all the world's problems. We've met twice, and I'm convinced now that we're not going to do that.
just kind of right there, we create no about, right?
But I want to make sure that we've accomplished something, and I think Jody mentioned it today. It was mentioned. Skip mentioned it. Somebody did at the last meeting that it would be one piece of legislation that would be appropriate would be something that calls for a periodic review of reporting requirements, so that it doesn't require somebody to set up a special study committee to look at requirements. I think this is important enough of a topic that it is going to be triggered periodically, automatically. We'll look at it. Our two associations certainly have given us a lot of food for thought here. A lot of it, as they point out, relates to things that are more on the local system level, but there may be ways that legislation can impact that, and we can encourage streamlining of some of that. So I think that is something that we probably won't get accomplished during this time, but we need to make sure that it doesn't fall by the wayside, and that we can look at that and keep that as an ongoing thing too.
So our next meeting, we're going to look at student discipline only, and then
student discipline, and then I want us to reserve at least half of our time in the next meeting to review where we're at. What do we intend to have to be the output of this? What are areas that we can do? Let me encourage you to take home as much of this data as you can, so that you can look at it. Let's use the phones and the email to get a head start on that discussion, so that we've already got some direction in mind when we meet together in October. Same kind of process that we did with gender equity. Hopefully, we'll have somebody here from when it was first instituted to say, this is what we had in mind. This is what we think is still important. At least with the Senate forward.
What's the OCG? It's one of these reports that basically one of you talked about.
That Senator Ford did?
Yeah, which was one of the code sections that you talked about today.
I think it's right after 740.
Just for the placement. Okay.
What we can do, if you would like, we can pull the relevant code sections for that and email them to you so that you don't have to go back
That
yourself.
would be, I'll look at it, see what it said, so at least have an idea of what we're looking at when we get here.
And if there are any other code sections that you want us to pull together for you, or if there are any particular areas that you have questions about, either give me a call or Janine, and we'll get those together for you. If anybody who's here, if you have an area of particular interest, if you want to let us know or let me know, we can take a look at it at the next meeting. We will get the word out as to when we'll meet as soon as possible, and try to have it on our calendar again for you. We appreciate your interest in being here. I think it's an important topic, and I think the fact that we have so many people here speaks to that issue as well. One thing it does say to me when I look around the room is that I'm anxious for January to get here, get back where I see some of y'all on a daily basis. And when January comes, I'm going to look forward to March when I can say goodbye to you. We appreciate you being here with this meeting.